This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, Special Prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. As always, we have a very hard-hitting and Special Prosecutor type show. I'm going to get through a number of things, but later in the show, we're going to bring on Major General Paul Valle. He, of course, was a Major General in the Army in the Pacific Theater, and it's very relevant with regard to what's going on with North Korea today. We see that North Korea is about ready to do another test of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Threats are flying on all sides. China and Russia are weighing in. The United States is in jeopardy, not just the West Coast, but the intercontinental ballistic missiles of North Korea can now potentially reach Chicago, New York City, Washington, D.C., and the rest of the country. So this is a crucial issue, and President Trump needs to take the bull by the horns. There's been enough pussyfooting around, for lack of a better word, for 3 decades. I listened to some of the commentators, conservative commentators, on Fox News, and I hear them talking about what Bill Clinton did and what Obama did, but we're also forgetting about what George W. Bush didn't do, fighting 2 stupid wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and neglecting what was going on in North Korea. And, of course, Iran, the Islamic Republic, by the way, is a full partner. So everything that North Korea has, Iran has, and possibly even more. It's a more sophisticated country. This is a huge, huge threat to the United States and world peace. And then we're going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about it right now as a matter of fact, what's been going on with Special Counsel Robert Mueller. The French have a word for special. It doesn't mean a good meaning. It's someone who really is kind of weird and someone who doesn't follow norms. Well, you know, Mueller, he does follow norms of the establishment. The establishment here is trying to do a hit on President Trump. Even the Republican Party, the establishment base of that, has been very negative and destructive of President Trump. And that's why he cut a deal this week with the Democrats with regard to the budget and with regard to a debt ceiling. He went around them, showing them that he's going to stick it to them if they don't start to act like Republicans instead of like a bunch of sissies that run away from every hard decision that they have to make. But let's talk about Mueller. Mueller has created a number of situations, not just the people that he's hired, who are big donors to the Hillary Clinton campaign and formerly Barack Obama. These are political hacks that have been put in as prosecutors. But notwithstanding that, these political hacks, including Mueller, have been leaking information about grand jury proceedings to the media. We know virtually everything about what they're doing, and it's intended to damage, if not result in the impeachment of Donald Trump. Mueller, of course, is a friend of James Comey. We just learned recently, as we talked on the prior show, that Comey actually was like Karnak the Magnificent of the famous Johnny Carson Tonight Show. He came up with the conclusion with regard to the Hillary Clinton email investigation and other investigations of bribery before they were even completed. And, of course, this is consistent with the way he buried a whistleblower who came forward, Dennis Montgomery, our client, who came forward with 47 hard drives, 600 million-plus pages of information showing illegal mass surveillance on the American people of not just Supreme Court justices, other judges, Donald Trump and his family at the time, yours truly, and anybody who challenges this government. This is the biggest crime in American history. And Mueller before him was director of the FBI, but James Comey, who we came forward to with grant of immunity for Montgomery to talk openly and to provide this information, buried that investigation because we found out, thanks to reports by Circa News and others, that the FBI has been engaged in this illegal surveillance too. The bottom line is this, is that James Comey is a criminal. And before that, Robert Mueller, who was doing similar illegal surveillance, he's a criminal. And I am preparing, and it will be filed first thing this Monday, a complaint before the Office of Professional Responsibility at the Justice Department and also the Inspector General, which asks that Robert Mueller be removed and referred for criminal prosecution for all of these grand jury leaks. It's illegal to do this under Rule 6E of the Rules of Criminal Procedure. Now, will the Justice Department act? Maybe not, because we have an Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who, while a very nice Southern gentleman, and I've met him many times over the years, and he's very likable, frankly has put his head in the sand. He's like an ostrich. He himself is in a defensive crouch, as I've said before, not with just regard to having reviewed what was going on with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, where President Trump had to step in to create justice by pardoning him, but Cliven Bundy. And we're going to talk about that, too, because this case is going to trial on October 10th. We're now in a critical mode of this whole prosecution. But Jeff Sessions, because he's been unfairly accused of being a racist, of course, anybody that lived in the South is a racist. People have called me that because I went to Duke University and Emory University School of Law. If you're from the South, you're racist. In fact, the reverse is true. You're probably less racist if you're in the South. Go over to southeast and northeast of Washington, D.C., and see how African Americans are allowed to live in terrible conditions by African American politicians here in Washington, D.C. And remember, President Barack Obama did nothing to help the plight of his own people other than to politic to get votes. Same for Hillary Clinton. But the Attorney General of the United States has buried his head in the sand. He himself is under criminal investigation by Mueller, also unfairly. But because of that, he doesn't want to do anything to push back against the Democrats or Mueller because he's worried it's going to push back on him. In fact, he's trying to save his own skin at the expense of the American people. And that's why Dennis Montgomery is so important. And it's why all of these leaks, grand jury leaks, mass surveillance, have not been investigated by the Sessions Justice Department. He's buried that, but he's very happy to investigate, to have Mueller. He was responsible by recusing himself and having the second in command at the Justice Department, Rod Rosenstein, appoint Mueller. Rosenstein is no Republican. He's no conservative. He was the U.S. Attorney for Maryland under Barack Obama. That was an absolute outrage, and the president was right to say that, frankly, Sessions should be gone because of that, and because of that, Rosenstein as well. But, of course, if he does that, that creates a firestorm and furthers his impeachment. He will never be impeached, but that is convicted and impeached. No president ever has been. It's a weakness in our constitutional system here that we can't remove presidents. Certainly this president should not be removed. In my view, he's doing things right. He's doing what he thinks is best for the country. He's not worrying about the consequences. Frankly, I think he's a lot like me. He just lets it rip, and that's the way it has to be today. And that's why this show is Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, because we are not just regurgitating the news, we are making the news, and we are pushing for an investigation by the Justice Department and by perhaps an appointed special counsel, which should be appointed by Rosenstein, to investigate the mass surveillance in this country. And, of course, we have a court case that's pending on this. Dennis Montgomery and I filed a court case that's in front of Judge Richard Leon. I'm the only lawyer ever to have enjoined the NSA for prior illegal surveillance, but they continue to do this. We know that from various leaks that have also occurred from the sources inside the government, that they're still surveilling people unjustly and unconstitutionally under both the U.S. Freedom Act and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So Dennis Montgomery, he's a patriot. He's come forward, and frankly, he could use some help. He's got a brain aneurysm. He's someone who is severely harmed and in bad health. They've attacked him. They've tried to smear him out of the intelligence agencies. You can help him by going to www.gofundme.com/CIA whistleblower. If you can help him, that would be great. But I also want you to help Freedom Watch. We are your private Justice Department. Frankly, we don't have a Justice Department. You know, Sessions is doing some good work with regard to immigration, but that's all that interests him because he's not going to be attacked for that. But he's basically become a chameleon when it comes to everything else. And that's why we have to step up to the plate at Freedom Watch. We need your strong financial and other support because we are your special counsel. We are your special prosecutor. And that's why I try to educate the public on what we are doing today. So go to www.freedomwatch.org www.freedomwatchusa.org. www.freedomwatchusa.org. Please contribute to our cause. We're small, but we need to ramp up. We need to fill the void that's being left by the Attorney General and his neutered Justice Department, which sits by and watches Trump get destroyed when he doesn't do anything because he wants to save his own skin. And, of course, we saw what happened with Sheriff Joe Arpaio. He had promised to review Arpaio's criminal prosecution. Instead, he sloughed it off and did nothing. But the president had the courage to step in and pardon Arpaio, which was the right thing to do because he was being set up by a Clinton-appointed judge, Susan Bolton, who was basically repaying her benefactors for getting that judgeship. And regrettably, that's the way most of the judiciary is today. You can almost predict based upon who appointed a judge, which president, how that judge is going to rule. And that's why you need a Freedom Watch, and that's why years ago I started Judicial Watch, because these judges, frankly, are intellectually or actually corrupt for the most part when it comes to these political types of cases. And it's why we're left defenseless without a justice system that functions for the American people. And that's why Freedom Watch and Larry Klayman exists, and that's why this show exists. It's why it's so important that you forward information about this show to your friends. Let them listen to it. Ask that their local stations be included on the affiliate list of Radio America so we can reach out far and wide. You know, there was a report just today, the influence that Fox News has had politically in this country, much more than MSNBC and CNN. Well, you know what? We can do even a better job than Fox News because we tell it is. We don't shade anything. For years, Fox News has been careful about what it said, but I'm not careful. I say what I think's right, and that's why you need to listen to this show and also go to our website at www.freedomwatchusa.org. We're going to have a great show when we come back. I'm going to talk a little bit about Bundy, but for right now, check out what we do at freedomwatchusa.org. We'll be right back with more, and we're going to be talking about what's happening with Bundy, which is also a legal outrage.
Dangerous.
Don't care. Use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor.
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I want to give you an update on what's been happening in Las Vegas, Nevada, with regard to the Cliven Bundy prosecution. This case was brought over a year and a half ago. There were nearly 20 defendants that were indicted by the Obama Justice Department. And the fact that this case continues tells you that the Obama deep state controls the Justice Department. Over 97%, this was a figure that was released by Newt Gingrich, who did a study on this, of the lawyers at the Justice Department, my once former proud alma mater, either donated politically to Hillary Clinton in the last election or voted for her. It tells you what you're up against. Sessions is not even control of his own department. Of course, since he refuses to assert himself, it's even worse. And I asked him, I had a confidential telephone conversation with him on his cell phone many months ago. I asked him to review the Bundy prosecution. I didn't ask him how to come out. I didn't want to tell him that. I have too much pride and I have too much respect for the office to tell him to cook any result like Comey did with regard to the investigation of Hillary Clinton. But he didn't do it. And I asked for meetings, and those were pushed off. And finally, he goes to Las Vegas. I'm there at the same time visiting with Cliven at the federal prison in Pahrump, which is a little bit like Alcatraz. I mean, if you try to escape from Pahrump, I'm never suggesting that anyone do that. I wouldn't legally, but you'll be bitten by rattlesnakes. It's right out in the desert. But instead of reviewing this thing, he goes to Las Vegas. He grandstands on his immigration sanctuary city proposals at the time, praises the prosecutors who have committed a number of prosecutorial abuses in this case, and then says, I'm not taking sides. Well, what kind of an attorney general says, I'm not taking sides? You know what? Go back to Alabama. Go watch the Crimson Tide play on Saturday and have fun. But if you want to be attorney general, man up and do your job. And that's why what's going on is so important, because Cliven Bundy's going to trial with 2 of his sons and 5 other defendants on October 10th. He only has one local counsel at this time. So far, this judge has kept me out of the case, Judge Gloria Navarro, handpicked by corrupt Senator Harry Reid, who branded the Bundy family domestic terrorists because they stood up for their legal rights, because peaceful protesters came armed, because those protesters had seen that the Bundy family had had the crap beaten out of them, their cattle killed, and their dog kicked. Now, this judge is bent on convicting Cliven Bundy. Even the Las Vegas Review-Journal, a mainstream publication, has talked about all of her constitutional abuses. Now, I'm fighting to get in. We're in front of the Supreme Court, but even if I don't get in, and I believe that I have a really good chance of them ordering Navarro to let me in to be the primary counsel there, I have to be there because I have to work with the local counsel who's grossly undermanned. He doesn't have a lot of federal criminal defense experience, and he needs help. And also I need to counsel not just Cliven and interview witnesses and prepare motions, but also Carol Bundy, who has been threatened herself. That's Cliven's wife with criminal prosecution. The prosecution wants to put her on the stand. And the judge has already asked U.S. Marshals when she wanted to sit with her husband at a hearing, have you been indicted yet? Can you believe that? And that's what we're up against. So we need your strong financial support because I'm going to be there for 2 to 3 months. This is expensive. If I don't get your support and the Legal Defense Fund and Cliven as well, we all could go under. So please go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Cliven, C-L-I-V-E-N, Bundy Defense Fund.org. Please generously contribute to this because Cliven was just standing up for his rights. He's ranched that land with his family for over 150 years. He honestly believes the land belongs to the state of Nevada, not the federal government. And they tried to sock him with over $1 million in grazing fees on public land. Cliven paid money to Nevada. Nevada returned it. But the government claims to own 85% of the land in Nevada. How can you be a state if the government has a claim to 85% of the land? It shows you how overreaching and how tyrannical the federal government is, that they'll try to assert that kind of control. But let's say, for instance, you owe the IRS money. Does that give them the right to bust into your house, to beat the all heck out of your sister, in this case, Margaret, to violently kick and harm your dog, to kill the bulls in your herd so you can't ranch and make a living, and last but not least, to tase your sons? Does that give somebody the right to do that? Can the federal government do that? Well, under Obama, that's exactly what happened. And after that happened, and there was a successful standoff, and the protesters were armed, which they're legally entitled to be under the Second Amendment, Obama comes out at a White House Correspondents' Dinner and effectively threatens Cliven Bundy because he referred to his plight as similar to the Negro in the Old South. Well, you know what? Negro is a word for African Americans. Even Martin Luther King used it. So please go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Contribute to our cause. This is a crucial case, not just for Cliven, but for you. Yesterday it was Cliven. Tomorrow it could be you and your loved ones. We live in a free republic, not in a dictatorship.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I have on the line right now a friend of mine, someone who I've gotten to know over time with regard to the tragedy at Extortion 17 and other matters, and you can see about that by going to www.freedomwatchusa.org, the biggest loss of life in the Afghan war. But a true American hero and patriot, someone who also is not afraid to say what he believes. That's Major General Paul Valle. He was a Major General for the Army in the Pacific Theater, so he knows all about what goes on in Asia. And I asked him to come on because people, I don't think, have a full understanding of what's been going on with North Korea these days. I mean, we have a child dictator who's unstable. We have 3 successive presidents, in my view. I'll let Paul speak for himself, but frankly, who neglected North Korea, and it's not just President Clinton and President Obama, but President Bush went off and he fought 2 ill-advised wars, in my view, in Afghanistan and also in Iraq, and they neglected the real threat. And now we have a cancerous situation in North Korea. which, if it doesn't result in some kind of atomic catastrophe, with now intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching not just Los Angeles, but also Chicago, New York City, and even Washington, D.C., it certainly gives them the ability over there in North Korea with this crazy dictator, Kim Jong-un, to blackmail all of our allies and ourselves into the future. And, of course, Iran is its full partner. And if North Korea has this kind of capability, Iran, which is even more sophisticated than North Korea, can probably even one-up it. But I want to introduce you to Major General retired Paul Valle, really one of the great military leaders of our time, and like I said, someone who I put a lot of trust in. Paul?
Thank you, Larry. Happy to be on with you today.
You're welcome. Give us your take on what's been going on here and how we can solve it.
Well, I think from the standpoint of my experience out in the Pacific and North Korea over several decades, that I think when one analyzes it, you've got to look at the diplomatic, economic sanctions, which is a State Department type of analysis and actions that can be taken there. I want to sort of focus on what I call the military prism and looking at the reality of what's going on in the peninsula there and coming up with options that will be available to the president to follow through with. I think number one, Larry, that we have Panmunjom, there where the demarcation line is the demilitarized zone. And so over the years, North Korea, through its different leaders, has been an antagonistic with a tyrannical government that totally dominates its population and that's been opposed to any kind of reunification at all. And they've been the client state, basically a stepchild of China over these past decades. So when you look at it from a military standpoint, let me go over the composition of forces there. And before that, I'll talk about what we call the threat analysis. And then the military, this is what you do, Larry. You look at the threat, whether it's conventional, unconventional, and then what you look at then is what kind of options are available to our commander-in-chief to take militarily. So we have the fleet over there. We've got two of the finest armed forces in the world, Japan and South Korea. And basically we're looking in this threat analysis of these nuclear potential tipped ICBMs, missiles that can attack South Korea, can attack Japan, as well as our territory there in Guam, and then potentially against the targets in the United States. So when you view that, you're going to have to come up with a military option that says, okay, number one, if they launch any kind of a missile or rocket towards any of our allies, and of course they just fired one over Japan last week, and it's directed towards Guam, for example, what we call a hot launch, one of the options would be to take it out on the ground, that missile site, at the same time take out some of the what we call regime targets, the command and control headquarters there. And that can be done conventionally or unconventionally. We have the THAAD system, the high-altitude anti-ballistic missile capability on the ground now in South Korea. We also have the Aegis, AEGIS system on our ships in the 7th Fleet. And we're able to launch cruise missiles also from aircraft coming out of Guam and other areas. So you have a sea and air capability, plus we got 26,000 or so troops of the U.S. in South Korea. So that just will sort of key this a little bit so people can think more about the military perspective and what we can do or could do.
Well, what's, I think, important, and this is what I don't understand, okay, and I really love President Trump, and I support him. We're critical when we have to be, but he's a man with courage. And I think that all these threats that we're making right now, that part of it I don't think is productive because it's causing Kim Jong-un and his fellow maniac generals up there to react more quickly, to try to develop this thing more quickly. My view was, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, is that if you're going to get up on the dance floor, you dance or you sit down. And if there's a further provocation, as you're pointing out, a real one, not like what happened, in Vietnam, which got us in there with President Johnson, the Bay of Tonkin. But a real one, use that as an opportunity to strike fast, strike quick, take out the leadership, and see if the generals will, pry away from Kim Jong-un if he's still alive, or anybody else around him that's still alive, and then see what happens at that point. But be prepared to act quickly, because you can't let them get up off the mat. I mean, if you start something, you got to finish it real fast. I mean, tell me if you think I'm wrong.
Well, it's not a matter of what the threats are from our standpoint. They've made threats, Kim Il-sung, against the United States. So what President Trump has done in a very strong way, backed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that we will put them on notice. You might want to call that a threat. We're going to put them on notice. Again, as you go up the escalation ladder, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. But we have two options. And the great thing about President Trump, he's not going to announce what he may or may not do from the standpoint of a military preemptive attack or any kind of attack against any what we call a hot launch. So he's following a good pattern right now by peace through strength, talking strong as we should, not weak as the past three presidents have done, but position ourselves in and put them on notice that we will not tolerate any kind of a provocation, conventional or nuclear, against our allies or against our territories or the continental United States. And that's the way President Trump's looking at it, which is very good, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's fine, but don't you think also, Paul, that you have to be prepared to act quickly at the first opportunity and not give them a chance to group, at either... Okay, well, that's good to know. You know more than I do, so I hope that makes people feel better.
Exactly. We're prepared to do that. As I said, with the alignment of forces over there, they have targeted everything they can in North Korea. Basically, we can obliterate many of the targets within 60 minutes. That's how good we are. And so he is prepared to act very quickly on a minute's notice if we pick up a hot launch. That's how quick we can react. And then it's a matter with the targeting and the coordinates or whatever's in the targeting list, that all you have to really do in a command center is hit a button. And those type of counterattacks by us or a preemptive attack can be launched from our submarines, our cruisers, as well as B-52s and other B-1 aircraft that we have in the area. So he's ready to do that, Larry.
I'm glad to hear that. Do you think we may have to use tactical nuclear weapons here because some of the stuff is buried so far underground?
Well, we have bunker busters, we can launch, which are very effective. They go down about 3 stories underground. So we have a number of conventional weapons we would probably use first in that regard, and to take out what we call regime targets within that first hour. Now, if we pick up any kind of what we think is a potential nuclear launch, then we'll have to take that out preemptively or take it out in what we call the launch phase.
Do we have, I remember the neutron bomb that was discussed during the Carter years. Do we have nuclear tactical weapons that give off very little radiation that wouldn't harm, large civilian populations?
Yes.
And that's what
we have an EMP capability, an electromagnetic pulse, which is a low yield nuclear weapon which doesn't kill people, but basically it freezes all the computers. So we have the EMP technology. Iran and North Korea have been developing that as well. But one of the other options, which a lot of people don't point out, is that basically with cyber attacks, we can with the Stuxnets that you remember Israel used on Iran.
Right, and I think we used it too.
We can basically use that cyber to freeze their computers, which disallows the launches that are based on a computerized system. And most of their artillery and other things are based on that kind of a computer-fed system today. So that's another option that President Trump has on the table.
Well, thank you for that analysis. I wanted to ask you, we have about 3.5 minutes left because I was reading this morning. I know a lot about you, but I was reading more about some of your views on Israel and the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. And I read, tell me if I'm wrong on this too, that you actually advocate, and I actually would agree with this, relocating the Palestinians to Arabic countries rather than creating a second or third state there in the area, a two-state solution. What's your thought on that?
Well, no, that's exactly right. And break up Gaza and open the West Bank up to joint development, economic development with Israel. And that's what the Palestinians need. They need jobs. They need economic development. And a two-state solution isn't going to solve that at all. And many of the Arab countries aren't going to go along with it as well, even though they say it. But, Jordan, you look at the adjacent countries there, they're filled with Palestinians, southern Lebanon. And so it's a problem for all of them. But a relocation plan with economic development and education makes sense to me.
Maybe buy them a condominium and a Cadillac. It might be an incentive.
Well, it'd be a lot less expensive than we're spending now, that's for sure, and better used. But to me, it's about future economic development of the younger Palestinians in their 20s and 30s for jobs and education, be able to travel. And they're not going to do it when they're locked into Gaza with a fence and even in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria. So there's other more realistic solutions, I think, that they need to pursue.
Well, years ago, Ariel Sharon, the former prime minister of Israel, actually had that similar plan. He was trying to drive the Palestinians out of Lebanon into Jordan, thinking given their large majority there, I think it may be 60, 70%, that they ultimately could have that as their country. And I think that might be a good solution.
Yeah, all that area east of the Jordan River is basically open country all the way to the capital of Jordan there. So, but I don't know whether Jordan wants any more Palestinians, That's a question as well.
Well, the sad part is the Palestinian people are a lot different than they used to be, 60-some years ago. And, in that period, they were a lot like the Jews. They were very educated and learned people. And that's why the rest of the Arab world fears them, because they have greater sophistication. But today that may not be the case anymore, as, Fatah and Hamas have degraded the entire culture. So,
exactly right, particularly in education and technical skill training, which they need.
Well, Paul, I wanted to thank you for coming on because you really gave us a great expertise here, and I appreciate that.
Well,
and I hope that our listeners will feel a little bit better knowing that our military and our president, who I think is going to be a great president, is ready to take care of this issue. So,
absolutely.
God bless to you, and I hope to have you on in future shows. Thanks, Paul.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks, Major General.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So we're going to be right back. For the meantime, let's think about what's going on in the world today, because we've got all these hurricanes on the horizon. We've got nuclear threats. We've got justice departments that don't do its job. We are the special prosecutor here with Larry Klayman, and we'll be right back with more.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Let me talk more about the importance of this show, Special Prosecutor with yours truly. That's Larry Klayman. With everything kind of crashing in around us, it's very important that the American people be well educated. Regrettably, and I'm very proud to be an American, you all know that, but we aren't well educated. And we just seem to lurch from one matter to another when we reach a crisis situation. One of the real tragedies and, frankly, outrages of what's going on with North Korea today is that our government, under all these presidents, President Clinton, President George W. Bush, President Obama, who the North Korean leader must view as the three presidential stooges, frankly, because he played them to the hilt. But what about our intelligence agencies? The intelligence agencies who spend their time surveilling the American people, Supreme Court justices, other judges, and others, obviously used for coercion and blackmail. But yet, did they have information about North Korea. Now, if they're doing their job, they would have had information. We wouldn't just now be surprised that nuclear weapons on ICBM-tipped missiles are threatening the United States. Why was this withheld from the American people? These presidents covered this up. And why did they cover it up? These are three American stooge presidents. I'm sorry to call them that, but that's what they are. And frankly, they're at the level of being war criminals at this point, given the threat to the United States and to our allies. Why did they cover it up? Because they don't want to give the American people, quote, bad news. They don't want to tell us something that might result in them not being reelected or their lackeys in Congress not being reelected. So we find out at the last minute that this cancer has grown to a malignant phase, threatens the United States. Now we're faced with igniting a potential world war. China and Russia could potentially come in as well. And these people are out having a great time. Obama's out there, in vacations in Tahiti. He's got his $8 million mansion in Colorado, Washington. George W. Bush is painting pictures, out in Texas. And you've got Clinton, God knows what he's doing, probably cavorting around with more interns or whatever. And, of course, Miss Hillary is writing nasty books, blaming everybody but herself for her defeat. All the time, the world is burning. And what goes on here in Washington, D.C.? I got to tell you, I'm in Washington, D.C. today. Nothing goes on here that's good anymore. It's basically a mess. Now, we have a president by the name of Donald J. Trump that's willing to lay it on the line. He doesn't care. He cut a deal with Democrats this week to show his own party what a bunch of losers they are. And I doubt that that's going to be his party much longer. He's probably going to wind up going out on his own as an independent at some point. And we need to basically support him. And that's why what we do at Freedom Watch is so important, because we are your special prosecutor. We are your Justice Department. You have no Justice Department under Jeff Sessions. I'm sorry. Not just because he buries his head in the sand, but because everybody that works under him, for the most part, is intellectually corrupt. And I mean that seriously. I'm not overstating it. Because what you have is a deep state that is not loyal to either Sessions or this president, President Donald J. Trump. They're loyal to their own political predilections. And the worst section, I deal with them all the time, is the federal programs branch, who was sanctioned just a few years ago by one of the good federal judges in this country, Andrew Hanen, in the Southern District of Texas, who put a monkey wrench into Obama's executive order for amnesty for over 5 million illegal aliens. We were part of that case. I represented Sheriff Arpaio in that case successfully, along with 25 other states. We intervened, and we also filed cases elsewhere. But this is what we're dealing with today. So I really want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org. freedomwatchusa.org. Contribute to our cause. Let your friends and colleagues know of this show. It's up on radioamerica.com, but also I send it out on YouTube. You can sign up and get it. I also have it on our website. It needs to go out far and wide because we need to educate the American people. We need to rise up. You know, what created the conditions for the first American Revolution, and we're now in Revolution number 2, numero dos, is the fact that you had a printing press, that you educated people, that you had them primed to rise up. And that's what we need to do today, because we need to support President Trump. He doesn't have that support. He's willing to let it rip. I'm willing to let it rip. But who in Washington is willing to do that? So, again, please go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause, and please, Cliven Bundy, he's going to trial on October 10th. If he goes away for life, you're next. Cliven Bundy Defense Fund.org. God bless you, God bless America, and God save America. We'll be back next week with more from Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.